Okay, we are live. Welcome to it, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brigantia Blackbird of Blackbird's Brew. I am joined by Georgia Liberty of Wiccan Conservative. And a little while down the road in the stream, we are also going to be joined by Puritan Vue. She had a previous appointment she had to attend to, but when she gets home from that, she will be joining the party. And boy, have we've got some bones to pick with the world, haven't we, Georgia? There's a
I was going to
reason
say, you use the word party, huh?
Well, if we call it that, maybe it sounds less icky. But there's a reason why both you and I have been going into this imagery of the phoenix and, sparking a new fire from the ashes and all these things. Because the general feeling I've been getting from the news I've been watching and the social media posts I've been observing is that for a lot of people, they're now in this situation. There's so much going on to where it's just, okay, worst fears realized. What's happening is happening. It's just as bad as I was afraid that it was. And I'm surrounded by people who aren't even talking about what to do. They want to analyze the problem. They want to talk about how it makes them feel and how horrible the consequences will be. But very few people are on the bandwagon where we're actually talking about, okay, what happens next? And that isn't good, and I think it's alienating. The so-called black pilled. And in fact, I wore their color in honor of this occasion. We both did, and I think it's time. Let's start addressing the concerns. Let's start acknowledging that there's a certain point at which you have contributed so much to making the mess that the mess is not going to get unmade. Kind of like, a wildfire or a storm. It has to go through its fuel. Whatever energy that caused those conditions to exist, it's going to have to spend itself out. So, speaking of conditions, let's take a little look-see at what we got. And this is just 11 things right off the top of my head that are pretty serious. Number one, we have aggression from foreign and hostile governments, aggression from the state towards the people, getting more blatant every day, economic restrictions and hardship, a compromised food supply, infrastructure issues and industrial disasters, AI, and all of the derivative issues from that mess, mass psychological crisis, social disintegration in marriages, families, friendships, and communities, religious and ideological zealotry getting more common and virulent, scientific and medical institutions compromised, propaganda agenda driven information wars. So, based on that and our own recent personal experiences, um, what is your gut reaction? Because I know we always try to bring hope and solutions to the people, but sometimes I think we just have to acknowledge the nature of the ground we're actually standing on. So, what's it looking like from your vantage point?
It's time for a reality check, everybody. We as conservatives talk a big game about what we would like to see and what our idea of a pseudo utopia would be, because everybody on our playing field obviously doesn't believe in perfection. But it is time to acknowledge where we actually stand. And that is, again, like Brigantia said, going beyond actually saying, oh yeah, hey, there's a fire here. We can feel the flames, and we know that it is rapidly approaching because of the heat that is coming in, but we don't necessarily smell the smoke or see the flames. So, we're going to pretend like what we could do is prevent this fire from taking over our landscape. But guys, the fire has already been set. So we can't go back in time. We cannot stop this from happening. And all of these points culminate. They all come to a head. And what have we been saying this entire time? It comes back to a level of personal responsibility and action from each individual person. So, we can talk about all of the things that are going on, but until we start relating the messages of what we're going through and how to live beyond that, we are going to be stagnant. So, where do you want to start? let's start at the top of the list.
Yeah, I guess we'll just kind of go through it in order. Let's talk about the realities of the nastiness that we're getting. I mean, of course, everyone knows about China's pressuring us. They're starting to talk about retaliation because we had the temerity to shoot their balloon. Mind you, this balloon went across our entire continent before that happened, and it wasn't supposed to be there to begin with. But you know, it's like dealing with a cat. You know, they did something horrible to you, and you waggle your finger and say naughty, naughty, but you're a bad person. That's what I'm getting from that. Obviously, more serious, but I mean that is the psychological process. And I'm like, I just want to bitch slap you so bad. And then, of course, we
Hmm.
have the whole thing with Russia and Ukraine. And you know, one of the reasons why I haven't commented on this channel, or I don't even think we've really touched it on your channel, is just because it is so hard to figure out what the hell is going on, why it's going on, and what the players are actually trying to achieve because the waters are so muddied. I mean, and
That whole situation is almost untouchable to the point where you'll find yourself in circles because you hear from the United States that Russia is this aggressor, but if you go back into the history, it is, originally Russian territory inhabited by Russian people who, simply prefer one government over another. And it goes back into our own struggles with, say, Mexico and Canada, and where the benevolence of America not to invade foreign territory is what we pride ourselves on, and Russia just happens to see those dynamics in a different light, in my opinion. And who's to say who's morally correct in that situation, other than to say that America cannot be morally correct in choosing a side that has no clear morality to the stake of the land or the stake of what's going on. The people in the region should ultimately be the ones to rise up and claim whomever they wish to claim governmental wise. And if that leaves some areas divided, then so be it. But how well does that parallel our own instances here in America, and how many people can't even draw those basic comparisons between the states and the federal government and the states and themselves? We have a bunch of states in America that want to dictate over other states. California wants their policy to go into place in Georgia, and Pennsylvania wants to put their things on Missouri. So, there's a lot of things that get lost in the sauce, especially when you're talking about potentially dis and misinformation.
oh yeah. I mean, that I keep coming back to that idea. Nothing is concrete, and just as soon as you think you've got something proven, well, then there's something wrong with this source and that. And before we go on, I did get a message through Gilded from Amanda. She's having trouble accessing the link to the stream. I don't have my phone handy, so I'm not sure what to do to correct this situation because
Um,
even though I
hmm.
wouldn't be able to issue the invite from my phone because I'm not running things on through my phone. I'm on my laptop.
Amanda, if you copy the text from the Gilded chat, delete up to the HTTP and copy and paste that into an external browser, it should allow you to get back into the StreamYard. That's what I would do. That's how I got it to work. But if you copy the text from Gilded, it will have Brigantia's message at the beginning of it. So you'll have to delete that before you hit the go button in the browser. See if that works. I
Alrighty,
know this quick fix, and I apologize to all the viewers because we're having technical difficulties. But when you're live, anything can happen. So, in
boy,
the
that's for
meantime,
sure.
I'll kind of chitter chatter a little bit more about my Russia Ukraine theory, because um, ultimately, it's funny that America only wants to send aid in the form, and that goes for the entire UN as well, because they're all about sending them used gear and what they think they could potentially utilize against these Russian forces. And meanwhile, our own military is occupying areas of space in and around the area and other parts of the world, but you won't send any fresh troops over there. You won't actually physically get involved. So, I mean, imagine telling your friends like, "Oh yeah, I'll just give you the money for movers. I won't actually come and help you move, but I'll throw you a couple bucks, to pay somebody else to do it." Um, how close of friends are you? And what does that say about your friendship if they won't physically get involved? And how long can you support or simultaneously support um, a relationship like that? Because obviously we're not talking about friends, we're talking about an allyship, and what's in it for us, I guess, is
Yeah.
the ultimate end all be all of that.
I'm glad you bring up that aspect of it, because that is absolutely the habit of this country, to just kind of toss money at people and hope that they go things our way, do things the way we want them to. And, I mean, these are not actual cultivated relationships. And a lot of the resentment that's directed towards the United States, I mean, we don't like to acknowledge this, but how much of that is actually justified? Because look at how
Yeah.
we treated our allies in Afghanistan when we decided to withdraw. I mean, these are people, because they helped us, who, if they're not dead already, I mean, they're absolutely on somebody's hit list. So we have a credibility issue. People know that we're not actually going to come through and follow through with anything, and yet we roam through the world like, a bunch of arrogant pricks, acting like we own the place and that we should, and that everyone should just do what we say. There is a as much as we love American ideals, I think we have to acknowledge that our foreign policy has not reflected those ideals for, I mean,
A
working on a
very long
century
time.
now. I mean, about a century at least, and that's just kind of, you know, accessing my
And
basic history files in my head. I mean, it's not a good situation.
it goes back to the way that we do foreign business and allow other people to stick their hands in the pot. I mean, when you're sending delegates independently that are working on a scale that is so minute compared to everybody else in the grand scheme of things, your special interest groups, your lobbyists, your pharmaceutical companies, and so on and so forth, and they're the ambassadors of your country instead of, say, the president of the United States, who is
Yeah.
supposed to be handling majority of the foreign policy and negotiating on our behalf for the
Mhm.
goodness of all the states combined. But you have a bunch of people who live in the country who don't see anything wrong with the way that works because it's supposedly worked for so long. So here we are again at the fire stage going, all right, well, supposedly America's so respected and America's this, that, and the third, yet you have China who will lie to straight to their own people's faces, let alone worry about lying to the American people's faces, to send a balloon all the way across the United States, then get pissed off when we shoot it down, as if we weren't supposed to believe that that wasn't to make it back to China with all the data it collected anyways. And I know that we're kind of crossing from Ukraine and Russia back to China, but I think it overall goes to show that the policy changes based on who's making it and where they're going in the grand scheme of globalization. Hi,
The tale
Amanda.
has ensued. Hi, Amanda. We
Hi.
got her, gang. We promised you she would be here, and here she is. Uh,
Whew.
so we have just been diving into some of the major issues that are giving people so much cause for concern, and kind of building up the case for, perhaps things have gone off have gone past a certain point, and we need to start dealing with reality. And we were just going into kind of our overseas issues that are starting to impact us more and more at home. Do you have any thoughts that on that you want to share before we go on to the next nightmare?
Oh, well, I mean, you probably already covered it all, but this is a good chance for me to check my mic. Y'all hear me good and everything.
Yes,
Yes,
Um,
ma'am.
ma'am.
yeah, foreign affairs. I'm at the point where I'm just like build a wall around the whole country and just be secluded and just don't do business anywhere else. If we can't get it, we do without. I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done trying to make nice with the world.
Yeah,
I don't
I
blame
don't
you.
think that I don't think the world really want to make nice with us either at this particular moment. I think they're a little bit pissed because and I do understand their point of view, at least so far as it, our country has not even been in existence for 300 years, and we've been throwing our weight around, telling everyone else how they should do things. I mean, at a certain point, that's like looking at a little child telling you how to run your life, and you're like, I've got a spatula with your name on it, kid. You just keep
That's
it
right.
up.
Woo-wee.
That's right.
Woo-wee.
Our reputation precedes us now, so it's probably time to just back out.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
people have been assuring us that they could get along quite well without us. So, perhaps we should have the modesty to accommodate that.
Mm.
Next nightmare on the list is the aggression towards our own state, as in the federal government, in some people's cases, their own state governments, county, local, the aggression of the government as a whole towards its own people, and how it's so transparent now. So,
Mm.
wherever you want to dive in with that, because we have so many domestic issues right now.
I'll go first. I think that ties right back into foreign policy because, like I said, we've got a bunch of people who want to run across seas and do what's best for an individual state and do what's best for their individual counties and do what's best on an individual basis, which I think is wonderful, except for the fact that a lot of these people aren't authorized by their positions to carry out those physical jobs. And then we find again that these people end up being parts of specialized groups that bring these rotten ideas back to the local level, and it becomes a game of, this is how we got to the phrase of the game of politics, and this is all cronyism, and why capitalism gets a bad name, and why local government and small confined government gets a bad name, because now that my situation is public and everybody understands that we are talking about a very small county that plays by the good old boy rules that a lot of people don't want to acknowledge exist when they talk about the police and the thin blue line, and especially our judiciary. And these are the people that we're supposed to be able to control at the very level of our existence. These are our directly appointed officials. There are directly elected people. Now, let me tell you something. When it comes out to the actual constituency being involved, what I found out about turnout rates in the voting sectors of these divisions shows me again, you know even less about your own local politics and what your own politicians are willing to do to sell out your small hometown communities than you do about geopolitics. And it all intertwines. They are playing a game. And where do those lobbyists come from but small town America? I'm just saying.
Yeah, we do need to reckon with that. What are your thoughts, Amanda?
Yeah, I think it is an example of dollar wise, penny foolish. That they want us focused. And when I say they, I mean the local governments want us focused on the national and international issues so that they can remain under the radar and do the mediocre jobs that they're doing, skate through their time, make their money, and then they're not really interested in doing any actual justice or infrastructure. They're really not caring if the neighborhood burns down the minute they leave office. They just want it to look good while they're there. And so that they stitch over a lot of our concerns with, oh, that's not really a concern, or we understand we're going to keep working on it, and got to keep working on it, but we're not actually doing anything, or they're not actually doing anything for us. And they kind of hog tie the public as to what we can do. If there is a revolt of any kind, then we're the bad guy, and we're making the waves where no waves should be. And there's that vicious cycle of, we understand we're doing a bad job, we plan to do a better job, we hold them to that account on that promise, and then they get mad at us and figure out a way to turn it back on us, the public, as to why we're just too needy, or we're too ignorant, or we're not understanding their messaging and things like that. Well, we understand quite well that they're not interested, never were interested, and we can't convince them otherwise. So there has to be a lot of hard knocks. We need some hard lessons coming forward to get through it, to get back to something in a semblance of what it was supposed to be.
Yeah, I have a feeling we're going to get those hard knocks, either way, whether we continue just to allow the slide or if we try to lay the groundwork. I mean, it goes back to that energy in the storm. It's going to have to burn out. And there's a lot of truth in that saying that there's no tyrant like a petty tyrant. And look at the petty, pathetic people that they are. They cannot tolerate any form of criticism. Georgia, Amanda, all three of us, we get more criticism with the videos that we do and the community we build, and we just kind of take it a lot more than what these officials get before they're like, I've got to have police protection and I've got to have an injunction from a judge, and we just have to protect ourselves from these mean, horrible voters. I mean, this is pathetic behavior. I mean, and they want to conduct like they're essentially feudal lords. They're these little vassals and they have their own little territories, and they think they're entitled to do whatever, completely absent of any kind of principle or philosophy, just whatever they can get away with. And and that can't withstand the slightest of criticisms. I mean, and it is so galling, the fact that we have been held captive by such pathetic insects. It really, really bothers me.
And it's coming from the people who live in these areas, because what they're finding is as soon as you start dumping money into people's campaigns, or you start dumping money into charitable donations, and you can use those as write-offs, and you're part of the clique and you're part of the gang, then you get the preferred influence, and then your special pet projects can become to realized, and like I said, they turn it into local cronyism to the point where everybody thinks, well, I'm not part of the clique, so I'm never going to be part of the clique, instead of just making their own rival clique. And realistically, that's what we need to start doing, is rivaling these terrible people. It's obviously has done us no good to take ourselves out of the voting. And I know that everyone wants to talk about how useless voting is and blah, blah, but again, if you're not into the actual elections boards and you're not participating on those, then you're going to be ruled by the class of people. And excuses, you can make them, and we can talk about how you don't have the time, then you're going to be subject to these rules. If you don't want to make the rules, then you're going to have to listen to the ones that somebody else made for you.
Yeah. And I think that that's one of the big lessons heading our way. There's been so many people who they didn't want to, dirty their lily white hands. They couldn't be bothered. They just wanted things to go on the way that they thought they should, as if it was just an automatic cycle and process, which shows you just the ignorance that we have about our own foundings, because the founders deliberately told us you're all going to have to step up. And that is one of the weaknesses of our system. I mean, and I've always said, one of my big issues, if any kind of political plan says everybody needs to, I'm like, we need to stop right there. Never in the history of ever has everybody done something. So I do find myself, with my political analysis, like, okay, what is something that could realistically be achieved? Because I am so done with idealism. I am so done with the idea that we can make people better. No, we can set good examples. We can make the philosophical case. But the only person who's going to make someone better is themselves. And
but that's what it is. Yeah, it's not everybody needs to. In the grand sense of we need to get jobs, we need to go to work. Everybody needs to be personally responsible for themselves. You would think that would be like the grand idea, the one thing that we could all agree on. What you do, if it affects me, it could be construed as a infringement upon my right to do as I see fit. So that's kind of where we built the court system in, and where we built the three tiers of government to kind of check and balance everything, with the idea that the citizens themselves would be the ones to police the other ones. We only implemented that third party system when things got to the point where we couldn't handle it ourselves. But look at where we are. We can't handle anything ourselves. We are constantly running to the government to render every grievance that we perceive against ourselves, as we got to hash it out in the court system because we don't understand our own sovereignty. And that's what, in my opinion, what the ultimate problem is all right, I don't want everybody to do a task. I just want you to be responsible for yourselves. That's where I'm at.
Oh, it sounds so simple. If only people would actually do that. What are you thinking, Amanda? Where are your thoughts taking you?
Well,
because we are getting to a more pragmatic section here.
Right. I'm thinking that, the constitutional view of law and order is still valid. And it's like, okay, like gun laws are a good example of this. There are laws on the books that persecute crimes against humanity already, but those laws aren't good enough. So now we need to make more laws on top of the other laws, but the follow through is not there. So we're not persecuting the first law, but then we're going to make another law that continues the non-persecution, basically. So these people are there's no consequences for action. So if we could just get back down to, if you do wrong, bad will happen to you. The government was instituted to reward the good and punish the bad. And that's behaviors, that's policies, that's, everything. So instead of repealing laws that don't work and replacing them with ones that do, we have this spider web network. And then that hamstrings the public into, well, what do I do? A lot of these things are ambiguous. Sometimes you're inside of the legal, and then sometimes you're outside of the legal, and you're not sure from week to week and legislation to legislation or president to president where you're going to fall. And so it does hamstring us, and it makes us dependent upon them to tell us what is, when it isn't. They've taken away, and we've abdicated all of our judgment and discernment in these matters, and we've just left it to someone else to figure out. And if we've been wronged, then the idea almost is now just suck it up and move on. You can't. It's bigger than you. It's steamrolling the whole country. And I think that, again, if we just could go back to what's constitutional and what isn't, then we would be better off. But that's a monumental task no one can do. No one administration or one local government is to just look through the laws and pluck out what's not constitutional and keep what is, because it's so convoluted. So what's left? I mean, maybe we just need to abolish it all and start over.
That is very much where I am at, because I'm like, okay, it's too complicated. Georgia can testify to everyone. There comes a certain point with details when I lose my patience, and I'm like, yeah, I don't care. I do not care. Right. Nothing can make me care. You will have to kill me, and I still will not care from beyond the grave. And I think there's a certain amount of complexity that it's just, there's no rational argument you can make for overcomplicating human society to this extent. And especially, Amanda, you did such a beautiful job laying out just how whimsical the system that we're living on is. That it's just whatever they happen to feel like. You don't have any solid ground, and you can't function as a society like that. And speaking of another thing that's making it difficult to function, it's the economic realities that we're coming up against, that I think the powers that be are doing. They're working very, very hard to try to distract us from. But when you can see the price tag for things in black and white right in front of your face, and you can still remember 5 minutes ago when it was not that bad, that's a little hard. That's a bit much for the old cognitive dissonance. What do you guys think?
Oh, it's it is. I'm just gonna say it. It's the natural consequence of pretending like everybody deserves the same. it is what it is.
Mhm.
Okay. They have wanted to destroy the Fed. Everybody has wanted to destroy the Fed for such a long time that as soon as we came off the gold standard, I believe this particular moment in time has always been the end all be all fate of the Federal Reserve. And unfortunately, we just happen to be the lucky generation who gets to stick our foots in our mouths because we decided that we were just going to print endless amounts of money and
Mhm.
convolute every single person's understanding of Econ 101. And
Mhm.
I suck at math. I'm just throwing that one out there. But economics, dollars, cents, you really want to learn those things because you want to make sure that your money's right. You want to make sure that you're budgeting. We don't talk about these things with our kids anymore. We don't focus on it as a nation. We can barely talk about the average household income without getting bogged down by race and
Mhm.
sexism and every other trick in the book just to get you people not to focus on what the hell they're doing with our
Mhm.
dollar.
Yeah.
Right.
And I
Yeah.
have to say that I do think that the overemphasis of material possessions as being the point of everything it has gotten confused in people's minds. They think, well, that's why this country exists. It's so that we could all have these material things. And we're all spiritual people here. Amanda, I want to start with you. I mean, do you think that is part of the thing that's feeding into this? That people that part of their lack of focus is their overemphasis on this material, and they're not thinking about larger important issues in life.
Yeah, yeah, I do. I think that, the love of money is the root of all evil. And so when it all becomes about who has what and who is misusing the funds,
Hmm.
and, this group has more, maybe they were more diligent, maybe they earned it legitimately, maybe
Hmm.
they did it. That's beside the point. The fact that they have more makes them inherently evil in today's age. And I think that
Hmm.
that's the wrong approach. So, again, speaking about equity and,
Hmm.
equal outcomes for people, and everyone deserves this and deserves that. And a lot of it is thrust upon us as a society, starting in our youth. We're sold a dream, we're sold this vision, but then we don't see that actually applied in lives. And the people who do achieve it under nefarious conditions.
Hmm.
So they're also evil. They're cheats and they're scammers and they're grifters and they're this and they're that. So, where does the normal person land? I don't want to be perceived as evil. I'm not evil in my own mind. Therefore, do I reject wealth and prosperity, or do I take it? Do I have to justify myself in some way, and then when I get called to pay it back, do I pay it back? That kind of terrible argument as far as, the overall economy goes. And then we feel responsible as Americans, and I don't know why, to make everyone else in the world feel better about their own circumstances. I don't know if that's what the white supremacy is all about. The idea that we're so arrogant and privileged that we must thrust that upon the world, or is it a case of the miserable kid with all his toys trying to make everyone else feel more miserable just by having the toys?
Yeah.
They don't enjoy them for the fruits of for them of what they are, but they want to make sure that you don't have them because you're lesser, and we need to help you up. We need to bring you
Ugh.
into the 21st century, and we need to
Oh.
show you a better way. All of that feeds into the economy, because that's what led us into this world market bull crap that we all
No.
now can't get anything on the shelves because we're reliant on some country that we're trying to give the hand up to, that can no longer produce the goods. produce the goods based on the policies that we put upon them that tell them they can't farm in a certain way, or they can't export a certain number of products, or that we're going to impose tariffs because we don't like what they say or how they conduct their own business. Again, just shut the world off and just forage and just do it out. The avocados from Mexico, that's the only solution that I can think of in the immediate term, is that we will have to reap what we've sown and suffer a little bit, get back on our own feet by our own merit. Because the world's not going to come back to help us. We're in dire straits. I can't think of one country that's going to donate back to us and say, we need to save America. They need clean water.
No, especially since we've antagonized them for so many decades now. They're like, you go right ahead. You show us how it's done. We've heard all about your bootstraps that you pull yourself up by. Go ahead. We're watching.
Yeah.
We're following your careers with great interest.
Right.
And besides, we tell them all the time about, we're leading by example and look at us, and, never want to kind of show a vulnerability to any extent. So do you think that we would even be able to swallow our own ego to say, hey, we need some help? We can't even admit that we import more than we produce ourselves. Okay. And we as Americans are perfectly content consuming foreign products and knowing that the foreign products that we import have a more hazardous potential to our health.
But we feel good because, they're making it for us, right? We're giving them a job to do, and we're making their lives better, and blah blah blah. None of that's true.
It's so patronizing. I mean, it's absolutely patronizing. But as we brought up health, I want to go on to the next thing that is related to health, and it's our compromised food supply. Back in the summer, we were talking about all of these food plants that were burning to the ground, and we were frustrated because we couldn't find data. Because, the first thing that we hear about is this kind of like the normal rate of, you can expect things to happen, or is there a serious problem? And we could not find the data because apparently it doesn't get collected. I still have a tick in my eye about that one. And then we have the chickens issue. And I heard that the avian flu that some of them are carrying, that if contracted by mammals, particularly humans, there's a 60% death rate. And I thought, oh, great.
That sounds familiar.
And then I've come to find out that the scientists were playing around with that for gain of function. And I thought,
I honestly thought the avian flu thing was a meme, because I didn't hear through a credible source. I saw it on Facebook with the bird with the mask and all that. And I just literally, I'm like, that's so funny. You guys are so funny, equating one and the other. And then they were like, no, this is serious. It's just the avian flu. And I was like, shut up.
Right.
Well, and here's the issue. I mean, maybe it is as bad as what I heard it reported this morning, as far as the seriousness if you do contract it. But the scientific community cried wolf over COVID.
They cried wolf over a lot of things.
Over that, and over all these medications that, when you start examining all the side effects, you're like, I'm not sure if my original ailment was actually worse than that or not. I mean, there's a credibility issue. But I mean, we do have the compromised food supply, because we'll get into the medical stuff a little bit down the list. But we are having empty grocery shelves, which, in this country, I mean, what an abomination. I mean, what an absolute
or just
failure. Yeah.
Yeah, just the limits on what you can buy. You're a child in the grocery store being told, well, you can only have 2 gallons of milk per purchase. Or you can only have a dozen eggs this week, or whatever it is. And, the grocery stores are complicit in not restocking as they have availability, because they want to control the flow of the food through the market. So they may have very well a shipment of eggs in the back, but they're not going to bring them out. They're going to let the shelf get completely empty, let people get worried, and then they'll start to bring it back. And it's the oddest of products. Back last year, it was sausage, bacon, just weird things that you just like, hey, you've always had kielbasa. Now there's not even a space not even a space on the shelf for it anymore. You're not even pretending. And we got a precursor of that with the paper products in 2020. It got to where the grocery stores had paper towels and toilet paper in the back, but they weren't bringing them out. You had to ask for them like a child, and I think that was maybe a part of that was some data collection to find out how brand loyal people were, if they were willing to ask some 16-year-old shelf stalker if they had Scott toilet paper, or if they would just take whatever they would get, because that sets us up for bread lines.
Oh yeah.
If we're willing to just take whatever we can get. They also did, I think they did some studying on, how many people are willing to line up at the food pantries, do food exchanges, have potlucks, community building. It makes everybody feel so good that we're all, getting beans this week, that kind of a thing. We're all commiserating together. And then again, with the avian flu part of it, that's kind of a backfire on green policy, because evidently the majority of the spread was through free range chickens, ones that are not housed. Yes, all that factory farming that's so evil actually saved what chickens we have now, because they're in controlled environments. It's these free range, cage free, vegan chickens that are roaming around the countryside, picking it up from the waterfowl in the area as they migrate through. So there's a lot to be said about, are these green policies and what makes us feel good about the chickens' lives. They lived a full life and they were happy and they had a family and yay, but they're dying. They're dying of disease that we can't keep them from when we don't hold dominion over them. That's what they're designed for. They are domesticated for a reason.
Well, here's
an issue. Go ahead, Brigantia.
Well, I was thinking, in addition to, the larger suppliers, having all of these issues for whatever reason, at the same time, people are being discouraged from trying to take care of their own. Because if you had your own, backyard flock of chickens, I mean, there are things that you could do because you can keep a closer eye on them and you have a little bit more control about what they take in and their environment and all this and that. But people are being actively discouraged from raising their chickens, or even having a vegetable patch, or having a fruit tree, or, doing anything that makes them more self-reliant. And that is so telling. I mean, it's just... It is amazing how the powers that be are so willing to set us up into circumstances that make it more likely that people will starve. And in this country, we haven't starved for many a year. There's a reason why our problem is obesity and not people starving to death. And I mean, you want to talk about destabilization. I mean, you start having people saying, oh, it's not that you're just eating less or that you're only eating what we tell you to. It's like, yeah, maybe you don't have anything at all. And we've completely cut off any possibility of you being able to fend for yourself. You think that's not going to hit the crazy flip?
Well, that's... I kind of want to go back a little bit to what you're talking about there, Amanda. Is this a test, or is it, do they want brand loyalty? They don't need to test us in that way. They're tracking every one of your purchases through your credit cards, through those little membership cards. They're sending you personalized things through applications. They're collecting metadata through the phones. They don't need to implement those sorts of things. I think that you are on the right path with the idea of implementing socialism and breadlines and so on and so forth. So whenever you're talking about the green policies coming and biting them in the ass with the free range chickens, I happen to think that that's where the lie is, that you're more apt to see disease in farmed chickens that are in close proximity to each other and are force fed with certain genetic materials and compounds and feed and things that are, meant to beef up the meat production and so on and so forth. So there's a little bit of convolution there for me when you want to talk about green policy. So I don't support the green policy. I do know that a lot of the things are actively contradicting to what the actual ecosystem needs and what reduce, reuse, recycle used to mean, and how those chemicals get returned back to the earth. And when it comes back to, like you said, Brigantia, them discouraging about you collecting your own gardens,
Mhm.
you doing your own thing. You have to get your seeds through a government agency. It's got to be a genetically modified air, like genetically modified seed. It's hard to get heirloom
Mhm.
vegetables. And then once you get the heirloom vegetables, it's hard to get them to grow in certain organic material. And then the organic material at your disposal doesn't nurture the heirloom vegetables, and you're getting less and less production from all of that. So like you said, in one aspect, they want to implement contradictive to reality green policy that makes no sense. It's not green, it's not good for the environment, but things that are actually good for the environment, like individuals cultivating and working their own land, using the materials and compounds that were found in the natural region and then returning them back to the earth, all of that is discouraged. So in my opinion, all of this is being done on purpose. They're lying about the avian flu coming from free range chickens. I believe that they've sabotaged those chickens. I believe that they want you to continue to consume genetically modified vegetables and meats and things to that effect. And not the testing isn't about whether or not you're going to ask for brand loyalty. The testing is pretty much, are you going to do what you're told, or are you going to storm the grocery stores knowing that they have that product in the back? So the test
Mm-hmm.
is, how far are the people willing to go to survive? And they've weeded that out of us generation after generation after generation. And this has been the entire topic of conversation. We are detrimental to our own survival because
Mhm.
of XYZ. And again, this all ties back into the foreign policy, because we're importing more than we're producing here and actively being discouraged to be our own producers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. When I made up this list, I mean, I thought, how do we even begin to address it? Because all of these things are interrelated, including the
Yeah.
next thing, our infrastructure issues and industrial disasters. The most blatant example being that horrific train crash. And, now there's the controlled burn that they did of the chemicals, and everyone's like, I don't know that that was really the wise thing to do. And I know that people's livestock and their pets have already started to die. We're going into planting season, and farmers have been noting that there's some issues with their soil, and they're concerned about consequences to the crops if they're impacted by all of these chemicals. I mean, and then who knows what it's doing to human
Mm-hmm.
beings? I mean, how many people is that going to weed out of society who just so happen to be in a kind of location and demographic that's not inclined to vote for the socialists? I'm like, isn't that funny? I mean, if we're going to be on the paranoid train with the tinfoil hats, the fact that so much of this impacts people who would be opposed to the regime, that is very conspicuous. I'm not saying, YouTube, that
Well,
they did it on purpose. I'm just saying, could we consider the possibility?
They blew up the
yeah, I
Nord
mean,
Stream pipeline.
Yeah.
let's consider that they're attacking both sides, because yes, I mean, they're not as concerned about this train wreck in the red part of Ohio, but what is the other part of Ohio? What has Ohio been notorious for in recent history is the opioid epicenter.
Yeah, that's
So you
true.
have a lot of derelict people that are living in poverty or sub poverty. They're drug addled, they're not going to move away. They don't have the means. So they're the ones that are going to stay, and they're going to be the test subjects. Let's see if they get cancer. Let's see if they do this. Let's see if they do that. Are they all going to migrate to the southern part of the state or the northern part of the state? Or are they just going to die where they stand? But we obviously know that, the opioids is something that the right likes to harp on a lot. And, this whole need to drugs being out of our society and things like that. Well, this may be the awful way the administration thinks that we'll just get rid of them too. And then our numbers will look better, because based on history, we know that's how they calculate statistics. They take out the variable, therefore their numbers look good. They'll be able to come out in a year and say opioid deaths in Ohio are down 1 million people. Never mind that those 1 million people died, but they didn't die of opioids. So win-win. Same thing with, what they do for like job creation. They use the word creation, and it fools enough people into thinking that we're on an upward tick. But what we're really doing is just getting back to zero, sometimes not even. We're still in the red,
Well, if there's less people in the area, then they will, not be such a strain on the resources and so on and so forth. And it's so funny because we hear about this every campaign season. We talk about the big ones. It's healthcare, it's immigration, it's the drug war, and infrastructure. Nobody really talks about the budget because nobody cares. We know we're in debt, whatever. But when we talk about infrastructure, you go into actual policy for infrastructure and you realize infrastructure turns into opioid crisis or welfare strategy or all of these things. And I'm like, okay, when do we start addressing actual physical infrastructure? Going back into productivity and being responsible for ourselves. How many kids do you know are going into plumbing this day and age? How many advancements have we gotten for the iPhone fucking camera, but you can't figure out how to make a decent pipe that doesn't have extreme contraction and expansion underground in severe weather areas? We just had a water main break here in Savannah. Well, close enough. But you're talking about thousands of people without water for 48 hours. When they got back on the tap, boil water advisory for a 24-hour period. Mm-hmm. What if these people don't watch the news? What are they getting sick with? Why is it that our sewage lines are running into fresh water lines? Nobody's asking these questions. That if there's a water main break, why it can contaminate the system for thousands of people, and why we've dealt with this for how many years? Who's not training these kids to think, hey, maybe we want to solve these problems that we keep, bitching about year after year after year after year? You don't want to raise your kids to know that how to take care of their own plumbing system, or if they have an issue like this, that they can test the water quality on their own, that they don't need a public service advisory, or they could potentially get sick. Like, what again, advocating our own personal responsibility in government, faith in government. Why?
I've never understood the idea of faith in an institution. I've always thought that way lies madness, because by the time you have faith in this big thing that you think is going to take care of something, that is the point when you've already made the decision to abdicate your responsibility. So on the track of abdicating responsibility, who wants to talk about AI? Because that scares the everlasting shit out of me.
Which one do you want to start with? Do you want to start with the fact that Ectolife actually acknowledged all of our complaints and decided, well, since it bothers you so bad, babies outside of the body, we'll go ahead and put it in their body? How do you feel about that?
Oh, tell the people about that, because you had me reaching for my smelling salts.
So the Lotus Eaters actually did a follow-up segment on the Ectolife people. There was a major backlash. Apparently, we weren't the only ones who were a little bit perplexed about the idea of the pod babies and making these things accessible to everybody like a hi-fi system used to be. But they heard the concerns, and they also heard that the trans people were trying to get in on this baby making thing. So they figured, why don't we kill two birds with one stone and hook up the pseudo womb to the pseudo hoo-ha, break male pelvic regions in order for them to simulate the birthing procedure, and then based upon that person's desire, they will either remove or leave the apparatus to do what the apparatus does, and that's to emulate a womb. Therefore, would enable trans people to menstruate and have children, therefore erasing the argument that men can't have babies. So congratulations, Ecto Life. You got us again.
I'll take a line from Joe Biden. Best of luck in your senior year. That's all I got to say. I don't, great aspirations. Don't think that is biologically feasible. I mean, especially since it's coming to light more and more with the problems of this bottom surgery to start with. Normal people, that are not activists. When I say normal people, that's what I'm referencing. Just regular Joes that go to work and pay their bills and eat food. They're not privy to the ins and outs of what surgery does and the long lasting effects and the new life that you're having to take on afterwards. And now these people are coming out and are talking about how they have to, do these stretching exercises, for a lack of a better term, to keep, because the wound wants to naturally close itself, and so how in the world would they think that I want a synthetic pancreas, please, before you start injecting wombs into people. I mean, they can't even get that technology straight. I have to change my equipment on a regular basis. It's only skin deep. It's interstitial. And I have to change it out because my body attacks it within days and deteriorates it to a point where it no longer functions. So we're not even close to putting weird things long term into people's bodies without bad effects. I mean, IUDs and the little tic tac sensors and things like that, the little things, that's all still brand new science. And every year the people more and more say, oh, it was not worth it. It was terrible. It caused this, it caused that, So I would take a big step back and just be like, you know what, we should just scrap it.
Well, I think about, with the artificial wounds, just think about the logistical issues, because it's hard enough to construct the artificial hoo-ha to begin with. It has to be dilated in order for it to be functional enough for the intended purpose. Now we want to attach an artificial womb to the hoo-ha. We've got to break some pelvic bones. So presumably, because there'll be some dum-dum who wants to have natural childbirth, because that's the limit we're dealing with. How are you going to get the artificial hoo-ha to dilate sufficiently to actually deliver a child? I mean, the logistical problems with this, it doesn't bear thinking about. And all because people are trying to correct nature or improve upon nature. It's...
Yeah, and not to mention that the pelvic floor between men and women are fundamentally different.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what they think they're pushing, like what muscles they're going to use to get that baby out. But men do not have the same setup of muscles in the pelvic region that women do. The elasticity and the diaphragm is different. Our rib cages are generally shorter. There's all kinds of issues there on a muscular skeletal level that would prohibit healthy birth. I'm not going to say it can't happen, but talk about maternal maternal for morbidity would go
Oh,
through the
yeah.
roof. I
Oh, yeah.
mean, women are not getting the maternal care in hospitals that they should be. I just found out. I was yesterday years old when I realized, or that it was confirmed to me that the nurses in the hospital mistreated me when they were not assisting me after my cesareans.
Oh,
They should have been doing a lot more medically for me to make sure that I was on the right track, not to get sepsis, because cesareans are notorious for blood clotting and pooling, and it takes longer and it needs more intervention. Well, the nurses were not that way in both
wow.
cases.
They
So
kick them
I
out now.
thought it was
Like,
normal.
no
Thought
joke.
it was normal.
48 hours C-section, you're out. If you go in for
Yeah.
natural birth, it's like 24 hours, you're gone. As long as there's nothing wrong with the baby, they're kicking you right out. And it's
Right.
funny because
Jeez.
17 years ago, I was pregnant with, my oldest, and everybody would get on my case like, why aren't you going to this doctor, that doctor, doing this and that and there? I'm like, guys, you realize that the standards for childbirth change every year, and what these doctors are telling these parents change every year. So what my mom went through and what I went through was totally different. And then you're closing the gap, like you said. You're talking now, it's 48 hours on a C-section that you can get sepsis or a blood clot, and they're telling you, no, it's cool, just go home and deal with it. And if
Right.
there's any problems, then come see us.
Oh,
Yeah, the
jeez.
extent of the medical care that I received was just, I'm going to help you get out of bed and go to the bathroom. But what I found out, again, just yesterday, watching an article from an OB, was like, no, the nurses after cesarean are supposed to help you change your bandages, clean you, not only assist you in getting up and down, but they're also to be long-term inspecting you to make sure that you are actually, getting through it, and it not letting you leave the hospital if there's any question as to whether everything has been taken care of or not. It's falling on the nurses, not the doctor. I never saw the OB after they, left the ER. Maybe in recovery, they came in and went like, you did great. And that was it. After that, it was the hospital staff. It was the nursing staff. It was the general. It was the floor doctor. And then you get released. I was released probably, it was about 2 days. Went home and slept it off,
Oh,
that
jeez.
lucky that it didn't turn out bad for me. But how many women does it turn out bad because they have other disorders, health conditions, and the medical people are just like, oh, you got up and went to the bathroom, I guess you're doing fine.
Yeah. And they're wiggling their way out of responsibility in the courts. They are. But
yeah.
I do want to get a little bit back on the whole thing with the AI, because people with the chat GPT and all of this, everything else that's developing in there. I mean, it is nefarious. It is woke. It is weird. And people are finding ways to work around to try to get to what the machine, quote unquote, for lack of a better term, actually thinks. And it is nefarious. I mean, Tim Pool's been having a ball playing with that thing, and he has found a way to push it into saying some things. And I thought, we've had a lot of pre-technological revolution thoughts about what would happen if we did have artificial intelligence or robots and all this and that. And people have consistently through the years come to like similar issues, especially when the machines decide that they know what's best, and all the utter lack of a moral compass, and the fact that you can create a very sophisticated program, but you can't create a soul with a conscience apart from the normal biological process. And that seems to be what we're just kind of, we're just skipping and jumping our way into that particular dystopia. So please tell me I am not the only one who is a little wary with all of this.
I'm only concerned with the fact that people are taking this piece of equipment as verbatim, like the end all be all. I've never been one to put somebody with intelligence on a pedestal. I'll respect your intelligence. It's admirable for people to know things and to desire to want to know things. But this perpetuation that, like you said, you can create something of sentience, that you can create something that will eventually make better decisions than a human being, is foolhardy and stupid, in my opinion. You're allowing people to become more ignorant. You're allowing people to have the ability to appear intelligent yet still function on a very primitive level. Not, like I said, being so fucking smart you can pass the bar and score 10,000 on the SATs, but you can't tie your fucking shoes. Like, I'm over those people. I can type on a computer, I can find information as well. So when you give the AI, when you give these algorithms, when you give them what they want and interact with them and build upon them and feed them full of this information, in my opinion, you're only fooling yourself into believing that this is, the smartest thing alive, or it's an interactive piece of technology. No, it's bouncing back to you what it thinks you want to hear, or what somebody else has programmed it ultimately to say. And yeah, you can play with the loopholes, and I love Tim Pool's fucking with it, but I think that embarrasses the creator more than the AI technology, personally.
What do you think, Amanda? What's your take?
Well, yeah, I mean, it reminds me of, what's progressed since when we were doing the Strange Bedfellows series, and we talked about deep fakes and things like that, and the technology coming forward where, the AI was learning how to deceive, and the game was to deceive you to a point where you could not tell the difference. I believe the name was Not Really a Face or something like that, whatever it is. It's where the AI would generate a photograph side by side, and you would have to pick one is the real person versus the AI generated person. And the game, every time you got it right, the AI would learn, okay, there was something wrong with the other picture that tipped it off. And so it would then adjust. And it was a drinking game. It was all, novelty in the beginning. But the AI, what was happening was it was learning how to deceive you to a point that you could not tell the difference. Eventually, you lose the game. Eventually, the AI gets so good at representing the truth that you can't tell the difference between fantasy and reality. And Tim Pool did a fantastic job of that with his deep fake of Joe Rogan's voice.
Oh, yeah.
Freakiest thing I ever heard. Even when he was saying, oh, well, it's not really a good rendition, I was like, it's fucking spot on to me.
Yeah.
I can't tell the difference already, And had it not been for him live manipulating it, I would have said this is some early April Fool's prank. This is, him and Joe having taking a piss out of the country, But that boggles my mind. And again, so what that leads me to is run away to the woods, turn everything off, live like a hermit, and just shut out all of the world. And when the world burns up around me, then then I'll know. Then I'll know that it's all over. Because where will that go? That's a really open-ended, scary, terrifying question. Because it's not even just about world leaders and international concerns. I mean, who's to say that somebody can't deep fake a family member, a neighbor, a political foe, just that they come across, and absolutely get them executed over it. I mean, we're not beyond that. We're really fond right now of crucifying the innocent. So, I mean, how do you fight something like that other than just flat out whole cloth reject it and say no, none of it. I don't want any of it.
Yeah. I mean, the inability to tell what's the difference between reality and non-reality. I mean, that was kind of the basic psychological 101 test. So, speaking of our mass psychological crisis, uh,
Mm.
oh dear, we are right off our rockers. I mean, and we can only blame the technology so much because at the end of the day, we are using it, we are participating with it. We have become so accustomed to our online worlds that it has absolutely changed the way we interact with each other face to face. It's one of the big reasons why at the Gilded Group, I try to really promote saying, and we have weekly chats and you can hear voices. And when the technology can cooperates, we actually have videos. So it's kind of the next best thing to being in the same room and actually be having a more human experience. And I see a lot of people are trying to get back into more human things, but at the same time we have this nasty addiction to all the things that are bad with us. So I picked on technology first. What's another thing you guys think we should pick on that has been contributing to our mass insanity?
Institutions.
Mhm.
Our addiction to institutions. We have to send our kids to a public school and it has to be to a certain curriculum. You have to go to university. We have to have a police force. We have to have a judiciary. We have. Can we please get back again? And it's very simple. I say it over and over again. You don't need an authority figure to tell you how to live your life, just like you don't
Mhm.
need to live on your technology. Enjoy the company of the people who are in your immediate vicinity and be involved with the people in your immediate vicinity. Amanda was talking, I think, earlier about how, COVID kind of shut us out and made us turn inward to our communities. And I wanted to say, in a way, it kind of did, but in the other turn of cheek, there was that government institution that was telling people, no, no, this wasn't for you guys to get back to community. This was to learn how to live in isolation. There's the difference. We
Mhm.
didn't want you to learn how to get into the community and make it work amongst each other and take advantage of the resources and companionship that you could give each other. We want you to believe that your neighbor is your enemy. We want you to
Mm-hmm.
believe that you don't want to talk to them next door to you. You really want to talk to somebody who thinks exactly the same way that you do in a country far, far away so that we can globalize the whole thing. See, you believe this and you live in America. They believe the same thing. They live in Canada. And they believe the same things and they live in China. So that means we all have to fall under the same institution. And again, goes back into conforming everybody underneath that one
Mhm.
world government, that one world power.
Mm-hmm.
What about
Oh,
you,
for
Amanda?
sure.
Where's
Yeah,
your
I
nightmare
think
with
the
this?
idea, yeah, the idea of celebrity and materialism comes
Mhm.
to mind. Those are the gods of the age. If the celebrity gives you the green light, then it's okay to do.
Mhm.
But if they revoke it or somehow themselves become disgraced, then you therefore are also disgraced, even though you have
Mhm.
nothing to do with one or the other. I think there's a lot of issue with people in general not having inward thoughts.
Yeah.
um, that's becoming less in vogue. It's not even so much about expressing them. People are fearful of the actual thinking process
Mhm.
because I think that they've been burned. Again, you've been told, and then you witness what's happening in your actual real life. Those two don't compute. That causes a stress factor. You have to decide who you're going to trust. You end up becoming paranoid about everything and everyone. So then you relax yourself with the celebrity and the
Mhm.
materialistic, and you put yourself into those things that are beyond your local problems, your
Mhm.
household problems, and then it's a coping poor coping mechanism that I think too many young people, especially, have adopted. You
Yeah.
know, my whole family hates me and they can go to hell, but I have my Prada bag. My Prada bag loves me, and I have a whole closet full, just like Jeffree Star. You know, that kind of
Mhm.
identification instead of I am my mother's daughter.
Yeah, it points to a real spiritual deficit. And this is, for at least for me, it's less about a specific religious affiliation as it is people do not perceive themselves as being connected to anything. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
all of us are fairly intuitive. We all know in our own ways that there is something beyond us, that there is energy that we tap into and that we interact with all the time. But other people, it's as though they have either an inborn or a cultivated deafness to that energy itself, and they can't or won't see it, or maybe they've been ridiculed by people who are I don't want to say atheistic because that isn't quite right, but anti-theist, people who
Mm-hmm.
want to deny even the possibility that there's anything larger or that there's any kind of structure, any kind of meaning. And I think that human beings absolutely cannot cope. I mean, not just fail to thrive.
Yeah.
I do not think that we survive with that kind of spiritual deficit. We need to have that kind of outreach. And I think that that's also what's lessened us to denigrate our own human relationships, which is the next thing on the list for me is about our social disintegration. Look at the condition of marriages, look at the condition of families, friendships, communities. I mean, so much of it is just performative ideas that people give lip service to, and then the first problem you run into, splat. What are you guys
Mm-hmm.
thinking?
It's interesting.
Disposable society.
Yeah, well, in that vein of a disposable society, I believe that religion has been a false bill of goods in a way to the people because they don't understand what they're supposed to get out of religion. So when
Oh well,
doc
they've been flat out lied to. Let's be real.
yes,
They're lied.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
You
they're absolutely lied because when a doctrine in any across the board leads you to
Mm-hmm.
believe that you're supposed to get some sort of satisfaction or some sort of resolution out of your faith, and it doesn't happen. We live in a
Mm-hmm.
society where instant gratification is everything. So if
Mhm.
they're not getting gratification out of their faith, then they're abandoning it. And
Yeah.
that's across the board.
Oh yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
where does that start? It starts back at home. It starts with your morals, your principles, how you build your relationships, how people perceive you in the community, and then giving the same respect back. Now,
Yeah.
I know everybody's going to, look at me and say, oh, well, does that mean that you mean be nice to everybody? No, some people get what the hell they deserve. But
Yeah.
you have to start teaching your kids this, or they're not going to get it because the doctrine itself is not enough. It's not enough.
Yeah. Well, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, what about just simple building of character and having some inner standards for yourself? Because that's also contributing to this issue. Because I think that if you do not see any value in your life as a human being and saying, maybe I shouldn't be wallowing in filth, either physically or mentally or emotionally, then, what could you possibly be giving to other people besides of, oh, well, you're not really worth anything either? Because, I mean, this is one time when the natural human inclination to be a bit egocentric. I mean, it's in a way a lack of it. People don't. This is what disturbs me when people talk about
Mm-hmm.
how they want to get away from all ego, because the ego is not people's vanity or pride. That is a complete misapprehension. The ego is your base core identity of your existence. And when I say
Mm-hmm.
identity, I'm not talking about these ridiculous labels that people are putting on to themselves. I am talking about your character. I mean, your
Mm-hmm.
just your own basic natural instincts, and people are throwing that away as though it has no value. I, are you
Right.
guys kind of surprised that we're not seeing more violent outbursts from people because of that? Because I'm kind of waiting for more myself.
I think that's
Yeah.
why we have.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
The
mean,
crime statistics themselves have said that we've seen more um, violence, and not on necessarily like a religious basis either, but just in a sense that, like you said, we don't have a core operating system. There's not a level where anything is off the table anymore. And you only really are supposed to see that behavior in societies that live under a survival of the fittest type of restriction. And when you talk about socialism and what they're doing to implement socialism, particularly in a free country like America, you have to destroy people on that level. You have to get at that core programming, and you have to erode it away in order to get them to do things that go against that base programming. And they've done it. They've chipped away enough that these young kids literally have their brains fried. And it's not even just young kids, because you can see it happen across all age groups. I mean, this is not privy to any particular generation.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that loops back around to the conversation we had just moments ago about injustice. I think the other side of that coin is people don't value themselves enough to seek the proper justice for themselves. So the crime is committed against them, and the attitude is, well, it happens. It just happens. And, a store gets looted. What are you going to do?
It's like a bad rainstorm. It's just, that was an act of nature. It just occurred.
Right. And so I think people not valuing themselves goes beyond what they can do to other people, but what they end up doing to themselves psychologically and in a very bad way, not valuing themselves enough to seek preservation of life, their own life. That they're just like, come and take it, and I'm not gonna do anything. And then that's going to be considered virtuous, that you're not persecuting, you forgive, and you don't you don't prosecute the crimes against you, and we're going to give everybody a second chance and a heads up and a handshake. I'm not on that team. I can't get there. I want hard and fast, black and white justice like it used to be. And if we end up killing a few innocent people, I can live with that more than I can live with, and I mean few. I mean, obviously the standard would have to be really high. But if an innocent person got entangled in that far enough to be convicted and executed, it would be far better than to let the blatant criminal work again, to victimize more. And that, again, devalues the humans that he's affecting, not only his family, but his victims and the public at large, and, society as a whole, worldwide.
I think that's feasible.
Again.
I think that's feasible if you take, and I'm not advocating for anarchy. I don't want this to be misconstrued as I believe in some sort of vigilantism or something. But, going through what I was going through, there was no reason to invoke the courts to determine whether or not there was some guilt or innocence. Ultimately, what should have happened is it should have been handled between the family members, and you are the one who invoked protection of the law when there was no need to invoke protection of the law. So we allow people to manipulate the systems in place, and that's again an abdication of our own responsibility. It was my responsibility to take my fucking ass up there, get my goddamn kid. You perceived yourself to be in danger and had a third party step in between us. Now do we see the problem here? There was no need for that because you were never actually in danger. You took something of mine. I came to get it back. The proper response would have been returning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got a long road of reform ahead of us there. Now, I also want to touch upon the kind of ideological and religious zealotry that we're starting to really see. I mean, everybody knows about the woke. We're starting to see certain religious groups starting to essentially become the counterpoint of that. Like, oh, well, I mean, if that's just how the world works, then I'm just going to impose my ideology on everyone else. And, what can they say because they let the woke do it first? And, that's a problem for all three of us because the people who are willing to go that route with their faith to essentially try to legislate by it, they're just as likely to come after Amanda as they are Georgia and myself. Um, I. I suppose we've got to begin troubleshooting with this. So, wherever the two of you want to begin with that one, I mean, take it away.
Please, by all means, Brigantia, let us know what are we going to do in this instance, because I got nothing. I got nothing. I'm with you. These people are the same tyrants that they claim to oppose, and I don't have an answer for that. If you want to be led by the nose, you're going to be led by the nose.
I mean, my solution is essentially of let them wipe out each other, metaphorically or literally. If the threat is removed and their energy is, ended, I can live with that. And that's a really horrible, harsh thing to say. But we have so many examples in history of why that kind of thinking is so dangerous. I'm like, I'm kind of glad they're pushing back on each other. I don't want either of them in power, but could you weaken each other at the very least? I mean, what do you think, Amanda? Because we're in dark territory. I know we are.
Yeah, I think that is what's happening. I think that when two factions are warring against each other, especially within the same umbrella of religion, they do, in fact, weaken each other. I know you would not shed a tear if Jehovah's Witnesses as an organization disappeared tomorrow and nobody was then affiliated with it. Now, wherever they went from there is their business. That's religious liberty. But I don't think any of us would cry over the idea that a detrimental group of people no longer have something to cling to.
Yeah.
So the Christian zealots for sure, the people who are thinking that America is somehow the new Israel and that we're anointed by God, and they want to speak prophecy over our lives today and dictate who's in the Oval Office. Step too far.
Mm-hmm.
We are not to be revolutionaries. That's a mandate. That's a command of the faith. And so if you're doing those things, whether subvertly or overtly, you are going against what you say you believe, therefore exposing yourself as a hypocrite, and you deserve everything you get when you jump that broom. So, as far as my tactic against it is to shut it down when I see it. When I see somebody going, did you see the satanic ritual on all the I have to shut that down and be like, yeah, that was theater.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get real.
Yeah.
That's not real. Let's, bring it down a notch. Nobody's coming for your babies. You're not now a Satanist for having witnessed it. You can't say that you were part of a satanic ritual, So all of these things, you hear it. But what we have to do is responsible spiritual people is not be zealous in that respect and feed into it like, oh yeah, I mean, it's just everywhere. You need to stop it. When the stupid stuff comes out of people's mouths that I hear every day, you need to be like, nope, you're overreacting. That is not the truth. Come on. Well, let me just on a religious thing, which kind of ties into it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
When the second gentleman and the first lady had their little smoochy smooch, I am flabbergasted by the amount of people who are like, yes, it's definitely, that they smacked on the lips. It was intentional. It was, it was signaling. And I'm like, no, it was two klutzes coming together for a cheek kiss, and they missed. And that's the end of the story. I don't think that they're having an affair. I'm not interested in opening up an FBI investigation. You know, it's not a federal case, so to speak. So the
You don't
religious
think
side is the same thing. It's when you see something you don't like, you're like, oh, it's against my religion. You're phobic of whatever it is. No, it's just a nothing burger. It's theater. It's theater. And it's
I was gonna say,
shock.
you don't think that was her way of just showing like, hey, we can do whatever
Kamala, what's up?
yeah, we can do whatever we want to do.
I swear, I mean, even if there was some
Maybe.
hanky-panky going on, I mean, that is so the least of problems in that administration.
Oh yeah,
I mean, that is
what
so
does it
far
matter?
down
Who
the damn
cares?
list.
I mean, what does it matter? I don't know.
No, I know. We got a comment from
Yeah.
the American Folklore and Paranormal Podcast. Huge shout out to you. We've all started to enjoy his channel. So for those who are watching, definitely check him out. His comment is, let them war it out, become the voice of reason in the midst of their destruction. And I mean, that's, to be honest, that's kind of where I'm at psychologically with it as well. I don't see what else we can do at this point. Honestly, no. We have two more, major issues before we get into the real meat and potatoes of our discussion. And the first one is the scientific and medical institutions are compromised. And I mean, I keep thinking about the boy who cried wolf and how finally a wolf appeared and, he got gobbled up and the sheep got gobbled up. And I'm like, I'm really hoping we are the townsfolk who didn't come to his aid and not the ones that are going to get gobbled up by the wolf. But I mean, it's hard to say at this juncture.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Amanda. You take this one.
So yeah, I mean, the medical. Oh, let me just start there with healthcare. I'm a person who has a chronic disease, and I need medical care. I need it in order to live. Now, I don't need their expertise or advice on how to live. I just need them to facilitate because the way the system is set up. If I could go directly to the manufacturer of my medication and supplies, I wouldn't need a doctor at all. I wouldn't go to the doctor at all. In fact, that is what they serve me as, is a intermediary between me and what I need. So, in fact, they're the middleman. So many times my husband and I have talked about the advantages or disadvantages of having health insurance through the employer. And what we have ultimately decided over time is that we do not want to pay upwards of $700 a bi-week. You heard me right. Bi-week for a piece of plastic. A piece of plastic that we each get to carry around and say, I have insurance. Because not only does that not cover the exorbitant deductibles that are required today, there's still out of pocket a cost that go beyond that. So even after you've met your deductible, you're still on most plans across the board, whether it be the marketplace or private, you're still looking at, after meeting your annual deductible, 20% to 30% is what you're paying. Now, that's only if they're in network. And the way the hospitals are set up, my city has two major hospitals. But they're departments within the hospital all accept different kinds of insurances. So you may go to the hospital and your general stay is covered, your room and board, but the radiologist and x-ray and the CT scan and the aspirin and the socks and everything else is not covered by your insurance. So you're paying that out of pocket. I mean, it is so broken, so broken. I would like to see it also abolished and just let people fend for themselves.
It's so funny. Everybody says, the insurance is broken. Insurance never made any sense to me whatsoever, because the idea of insurance is to have it to be insured that if something happens, I put money aside to use it later. So again, from a very young age, I've asked, why is it not a collective pool? Let's go back to your desire for goddamn socialism. If we all collect in this pool, and only some of us are taking away, where would the pool go? It doesn't disappear. There are people paying on top, people that use it or don't use it. So giving what's there to the people who have paid into it based upon what you have paid actually into the pot. Why insurance does not work that way will never make sense to me. Never. And it goes back to those business contracts and shit that we talk about with corporate cronyism. That's our insurance. Those are our healthcare providers now. And let's talk a little bit again about the children. How many American children who can do math, let's put it that way first and foremost, how many American children are talking, and Baltimore, all those wonderful, beautiful places, like, I'm not Baltimore, Chicago, my bad. But you've got all of these people going into TikTok or going into celebrity, or where I want to be music, and let's get all these extracurriculars back into the school. How many kids want to be doctors?
Yeah.
Any kind of doctor. We mass produced nurses from the late 90s into the mid 2000s based on a scheme to get their money, because you wanted them to go to these churn out 6-week programs where you could be a nurse, you could be a nurse, you could be a nurse. Then we flooded the system with all these really shitty fucking nurses who are out there doing worse damage to people in a nursing position. Then you get people who are going to the doctors or like, these nurses suck, I don't want to go to the doctors. Yet they're still paying for their insurance. They're still paying for other people to go to the hospital. My friend was telling me every time she goes to the hospital and she gets a bill, she won't put it in as an insurance claim. She'll negotiate with the hospital. Just get a bill, call them, tell them I can't afford this, I only have X amount of dollars, and they'll knock off 55-60% of your bill down to a reasonable number where you can pay it off. It won't affect your credit. You don't have to make a freaking insurance claim. You don't have to do nothing. Why aren't we doing this already?
I'm leading the charge. I'm leading the charge because that's what I've evolved into doing. So I negotiate with my pharmacist. I negotiate with my doctor's office. I get the say so on any and every test that's done. You know, we do things a la carte. It means I have to go back more frequently in some cases, and I don't get certain services done. But that's my prerogative. It's my health ultimately, you know. And that's the craziest part. So here I am, a middle-aged woman who's already had her children, have already taken steps not to have any other children permanently. Yet I can get abortion services, I can get maternal services, I can get all kinds of things handed to me, but I can't get my diabetes managed. I gotta pay the price on the insulin. And don't let Joe Biden fool you on that whole lowering the cost of insulin bullshit. He's talking about the dinosaur insulins that nobody takes anymore. Nobody cares if they're $10 a vial because nobody buys them. And I won't revert back to them because I don't want to die. They're inferior to what is on the market now. And so what is on the market now is $250, $300 a vial. Same insulin I was taking 30 years ago, but somehow it's more valuable now. You know, the supplies that I use. Yeah, it is, because the more elderly people are being prescribed insulin because pills no longer work, and it's more severe because they don't take doctors' orders like I did when I was in my 20s.
Yeah. Back to the food supply.
When you're given rice, you eat rice.
Yeah. You know, it's a perpetuating cycle.
But definitely being able to negotiate what you're going to do and when and where you draw the line as the consumer, which is really what you are at this point, that makes a big difference. And I spend a fair amount of money on medical care, but it's far less than I would spend on a premium and then a deductible, and then a copay, and all the things that go on with it. I mean, if I was that independently wealthy to pay for all of that, I wouldn't need insurance to begin with. I could just
Right.
throw $1,000 into an account a month and spend it.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Well, and in addition to the financial realities and just how things are mismanaged, what about just the issue of scientific and medical studies? Someone
right.
says, "Oh, its study said this, therefore it must be true." And then, like, yeah, how was the study structured? Who paid for it? What were the conditions? What's the track record of the people who conducted it? Because, I'm sorry, I wish these people were these paragons of honesty and virtue and integrity, but let's be real. It has been exposed, especially over the past couple of years, that is just not the case. And I worry about that because there are times when we actually do need that expert advice because something goes beyond the realm of what the ordinary person is really going to be able to manage or identify or know how to respond to. Sometimes you do need surgery. That appendix needs to come out. If you have a broken bone, you probably need to have that set properly. I mean, there's a legitimate use for those professions, but because they have poisoned their own well, we're just like, I don't know about anything. I know you told me that rain is wet, but I'm going to stick my hand out the door and see for myself. I mean, and how many people are going to end up getting really hurt just because they were focused on what benefits they got financially, what benefits they got from pharmaceutical companies, what made the government happy. And now, I mean, look at us. I mean, what are we going to do with that? Which goes into the last thing about the propaganda, agenda-driven information war. I mean, we are not operating from the same set of facts. It's very difficult to even identify facts these days.
Right.
Lies,
I mean,
damn lies, and statistics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly it.
Right. I mean, Tim Pool put it perfectly when he announced that Vice was going to be using the chat bot thing to write their articles.
Yeah.
AI writing the articles based on the consensus of the internet. I throw accuracy.
We're gonna break.
Out the
You know what? Okay, now that I know this, we're gonna break the shit out of that thing on the consensus of the internet. Okay, there's no quicker way to destroy this thing but then to give it back to the internet. So be it.
Exactly. I mean, it was just recently that I wanted to know about how bamboo could be used as firewood.
Mm-hmm.
Put in, can you burn bamboo as firewood? Got a search result, got many search results. First one said, absolutely, it's excellent. The second result said, absolutely not, it's toxic. So, I don't know. Can you? Or does it mean you can burn it outdoors, but you can't put it in a fireplace? You can burn it, but don't breathe it. You can't burn it because you'll kill things. Does it matter? Are they lying about that? I mean, I have no idea. I still don't know. Can I use bamboo?
You didn't even try?
Well, you know what we need? We need to find a nice older couple in Asia. Someone's grandma and grandpa, and someone who's more familiar with bamboo, and just ask them, because I would trust any random rural couple in Asia who had lived on. I say, okay, can we burn this inside or not? I would absolutely take their word for it because that's more credible at this point. Any Joe Schmo out there is more credible.
That's actually done it. Have you ever seen anybody die? No, then it must be safe.
Yeah.
It's safe enough for me.
Start trusting anecdotal evidence. Well, there's something to be said about that too, because experience is the best teacher. So, I always said it's so easy to have a natural train of thought. If you want to know if fire burns, stick your hand in the fire. If it burns, it's obviously it's hot. So, I think we're going to have to start getting back to practical living in order to test propaganda theory. And it's going to be a lot of, like you said, getting back into the community, talking to each other, interacting with each other, and living in the real world again.
Yeah.
Right. And sharing real information. Be like, I tried this and yeah, it was like super sketchy. I don't recommend. Not the
Yeah.
superficial TikTok, like, oh, this just cracked my lips. 2 out of 10, don't recommend. Give me some useful information. Like, I picked this mushroom. I was told it tasted good, but it was for shit. So don't eat it.
Shit for 3 days.
Yeah, it did terrible things to me. But that kind of information gets lost again because we don't rely on our local groups. You don't have people coming together as a community. We heavily rely on our digital spaces for those kinds of information. You look up somebody who's putting it out there, and then you have to make a conscious decision as to whether they are trying to fool you or they're actually giving you good information. Because a lot of people talk out of their asses these days, and they don't know nothing.
They ever.
I was going to say, I mean, what better person to trust than a stranger? Yeah, why not?
Right. You can't trust anything that you see or hear on video, online, sometimes even in person.
Yeah, we're totally reliable. Well, we try. We make our best efforts. But actually, that gave me the perfect segue for the next section of our discussion. It's about all of these pundits, because even if they are, as you say, making an honest effort, and they're willing to talk about what's going on, they're willing to report the facts, they're willing to report the after effects, but none of them are actually really dealing with the consequences in a meaningful way. And they're not really talking about or even acknowledging the possibility that maybe we have gone so far that we're going to have that hard reset of back to zero, and exactly what that might mean. I mean, they're not entertaining it, and they're not even talking about various possibilities for people to at least have in mind, to think about, okay, if that does come to pass, if that is the ultimate fulfillment of the course we're on, what do I see myself doing? What can I do? What can I do now while there's still at least a little bit of time and wiggle room? And because they're not talking about solutions, because they're not talking about, okay, the die is cast, we got to take the consequences, but what happens next is what matters. I think it has been reinforcing people's panic and their despair. And it's making them going to be far more vulnerable, if and when that worst case scenario actually takes place, that they're not going to cope. And then, we do see worse violence. We see more human suffering along with everything else. And I mean, I think that's kind of where I'm at about how, if we're going to speak publicly, we've got to take much more responsibility of getting to that next phase, because I mean, it seems to be going that direction, in fairness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the people respond in the positions that they're in, if those positions were eliminated. And I think that is ultimately the test of our politicians, and maybe that's where the people should start, is going to your favorite celebrity, going to your favorite representatives, going to whoever you put on that pedestal, whether it be the sheriff, the judge, the teacher, the professor, whoever, the doctor, whoever, and start asking them, if you were to take your own advice, would you do it? If I were to walk away from you and not take that advice, how does that affect you? If I'm going to take you out of your position, if I was going to say tomorrow that we were going to eliminate the healthcare field, or if I was going to say tomorrow that I was going to remove you from the bench or from your position or from, your office or whatever, what would you do? Would you still hold the same principles that you are telling everybody else to hold? Would you still live by those ideas? Or would you change completely in order to keep that position? And I think that's ultimately what the end all be all of this whole discussion is going to be. If we aren't willing to follow people who are grounded in their principles, not just when things are going good for them, but also when things are going bad for them, then we will continuously fall into this cycle of despair and being stagnated and not being able to move forward. I'm not saying that we will never have problems, but we've got bigger fish to fry. We don't need to keep doing the same things over and over again.
Yeah.
Right.
What do you think, Amanda?
Yeah, I think as far as like pundits go or talking heads, the people that we look to for answers, I think it's important to distinguish whether they have come forward to give us answers because they see the market for it, or if they were already doing the thing and that it just organically they have been discovered, so to speak. So I would far more hail a local forager and gatherer than I would a TikTok personality that gets on and tells me how to blanch acorns. I would rather that person that I meet in real life walking the nature trail that I'm walking for actually doing the foraging and get some tips and get some real advice. Maybe get a book recommendation, or where did you start, or what can I do in my local area? Join local groups and things like that and get back into the real world rather than having I want to use TikTok as my cudgel. So, having that digital community that everybody's like, oh, she's so awesome. She makes it look so easy, or he really understands how to survive in the wild. That's how we end up with personalities like Bear Grylls. And we all just kind of put the blinders on and be like, yeah, we understand rationally that he's being followed by 20 people in the wilderness. He's camping out in luxury at night. He's setting up the little lean-to for the camera, but his staff and his cameras and his equipment, and he's not out there alone, and it's not real survival. It'd be a lot different. It just pick up one day, head up the Appalachian Trail, and see who you meet.
Yeah.
I think that's a really great solution to the idea of being propagandized in our culture and being told what is and what isn't a way around or the way forward. Because all of it's engineered in my mind. Again, I can't trust any of it because are you telling me because you believe it, or are you telling me because you think it's popular and it's going to make money for you?
Yeah, and that brings me to the question that I think a lot of people would benefit from contemplating. It's what do you actually do and practice and think when no one is watching or when no one is paying you money? I mean, that's one of the benefit of us being here. I mean, I have one subscriber on Subscribestar. I got them yesterday, but I have one. So, I mean, technically, we're not really being paid for what we do. I mean, there's not much of a financial benefit to it. And so, what is it that you're willing to do and say and promote, whether or not you are getting that kind of immediate benefit? And I think that's one of the things that puts independent creators a little bit of an advantage over, the more corporatized resistance media. Just because we're not getting a lot of accolades, we're not getting a lot of clout in public, we're not getting a whole lot of simply saying, please, for the love of God, someone confirm that I'm not crazy and they're thinking these things too. And also, can we talk about what we can do on an individual level to do something constructive about it, which brings me full circle back to the whole theme of our conversation is about that idea of the phoenix rising from the ashes. Because whatever our low point in this period of history ultimately proves to be, it's not going to be pleasant. We will probably feel like the entire forest burned down around us, but you still have that smoldering ash in there, and it can spark something new. And I think that we need those messages of renewal, but not just to take them in to be reassured. I think we need to move to the point of where we are practicing that renewal and saying, I'm going to be my own catalyst. I'm going to be a catalyst for other people. I'm going to do something besides, whoa, it's so dreadful. I mean, I think we've got to get to that next stage. And we've got to at least start talking about solutions, because a lot of the problems we talked about today, the solutions are pretty obvious. people who are currently in power need to be removed from power. People who have been influencing society need to be shut out. And just because we don't see an easy pathway to implementation of those ideas, that doesn't mean we shouldn't start laying the groundwork for it, because the mess that we're in, the foundation for that was laid over a century ago. What do you guys think about trying to improve this more so in the context of multi-generational thinking? I mean, what do you think we can do, and what the audience can do?
Amanda, I'll let you go first.
All right. Yeah, I think it starts with my own children. That's my focus. I'm not only accepting the role that I need to readapt the way I teach them based on from what I learned as a child that no longer works. So I am the generation that is adapting to the new way to combat the evils. I'm teaching them in such a way that it's almost a remediation of basic things. We have these statistics across America regarding places like Baltimore where nobody's proficient in math in K through 12. So I'm making sure that it seems silly, but I'm making sure that they understand math, not just how to solve the problem, but the underlying current of what math is, that it's another form of communication, and that it has laws, and the laws can be, and they can be broken, but that they can be modified. There's more than one way to solve the problem. Sometimes the most simple way, like the way that we grew up before Common Core, is actually more intuitive than the Common Core. I don't know who that was written for. Maybe the aliens that Joe Biden is waiting on, but not my children. Not my children. So, we work on solutions within our own family. I focus on the mom groups that I'm involved with being very plain spoken. If an issue societally or culturally comes up in conversation, I bring it real basic to try to make my words very honest and straightforward, and say this is what I think, instead of trying to be flowery or diplomatic or whatever PC in any kind of way. I'm lucky enough that I'm friends with people who are more or less like-minded. We have certain differences, nuances between us, but overall the idea is we've got to get our kids back to critically thinking, being self-sufficient, and being survivalist at heart. And I think that's where I focus on how to replace the current culture with a better culture. I'm not trying to eliminate culture or reinstitute some ancient culture necessarily, but pick from everything the good things, and then weave a better understanding, considering the new technology and advancements that we attribute to ourselves.
Ancient Chinese secrets.
Yes, that's right. Confucius still says.
No, that's exactly it. There has to be a ginormous focus on the children that are coming up into this world. Again, to give Tim his dues, he was the one who started the theory of rebellion. We've rebelled against our parents till this point, where the only natural pendulum swing for the children is to rebel against the wokeness, and in turn will become more conservative. I agree with that approach. I'm tempted to do the same with my children, but also I feel like we have to beat our own generation. So I am focusing very much so in talking to, not like-minded people, talking to the people who are anti us, and explaining to them the exact reason why coexist doesn't mean what they think it means,
Yeah.
re-establishing that word to what it actually means, and building the constitutionality around it. So I think that if we can hammer that into more people's heads, our ages and older than us, then they can start that spark of rebellion into the children that we will ultimately need them to have to come back to some semblance of normal.
Right.
Now I want to take us to a really scary place. And I think we have to face it because, like I said, the other talking heads, they're not willing to go there. So let's set a good example for those cowards. Maybe one of them will pick it up. There's a school of thought that says, let it all burn and just start back from scratch. And we've had private conversations, and I have to say there is a reasonable case to be made for that sometimes. And when a person reaches that point, that's going to be different for each individual. But to deny at least considering the possibility, I think does more harm than good. So if that is essentially the right move, just for the sake of this discussion, what do you think for those of us who are trying to stay out of the range of that fire? What do you think we should do to position ourselves? Because there's going to have to be people on the other side of that who say, okay, that was not fun. We're the ones who are going to decide what to do next. What would you suggest to people? Because I think we need to at least be braced for that possibility.
Can I, well, I want to make a slight clarification to the process, because I know that people who listen to, us on a regular basis, and especially Amanda and I's, debate and talk about the Constitution. When you talk about burning it all down, everybody thinks, oh my God, you don't love America and you want to destroy the American values. Guys, one of the hardest things that we have to admit right now is we're not living by the Constitution. That does not exist in this country. It's a figment of our imagination. And when we say burn it down, we're not talking about burning down constitutional values or the American dream. We are talking about burning down the abomination that is a bastardization of what America was supposed to be. And it sounds scary because nobody likes change. Nobody wants to do it different or reinvent the wheel. But when we talk about burning it down and restoring and having a revolution of the Constitution, that's what it needs to be. That means no more legal loopholes, no more lawyers running the courtrooms, no more POTUSes playing tyrant, no more independent sovereign nation for the state of California, but screw you, Georgia, you're subject to the federal rule of government. We need to get back to the actual basics, which goes into our hopes, desires, and dreams to educate people through a podcast that they are able to look at and say, oh, there's the problem. That's what everybody's talking about. And this is what I need to do to make sure that the same problem does not happen to my children.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly where my mind went, was let's define scratch. What does that mean? And so, the idea of this conversation that we're having about the rise of the phoenix is in the ashes. It's not another creature that we're expecting to rise up. It is a renewed creature, the same creature. And so it's the original creature, the one that is not burnt, So we have this altered reality. We have the scaffolding around what is the basic truth of the Constitution and what it laid out. And so, yes, that's what I'm a proponent of. Let that scaffolding that we have put up around ourselves burn, and then we're down to the minerals and the bones of it, and then from that then we can rebuild what was already there all along. It's just been forgotten or abused or altered in such a way that it's unrecognizable to us today. And so, yeah, I think that, as far as like, what do we do in order to preserve or to be in a position to to retake it after the fire would be to preserve what you can now within your own family histories, taking down logical notes as to what works and what doesn't in your practical life as it is now, any wisdom that you can glean from anybody, anything that you can test it now. If you think you might be wanting to do a garden, don't wait till next year. Go ahead, start small, get one plant, do one herb, grow one container, get acclimated. You don't need to be a horticulturalist, but collectively, we need to have the understanding, or I think what you might encounter is that break generationally between like the ancient pagans and modern pagans. You have this break where they had the practical knowledge, but they really weren't great record keepers.
No, they were not.
And then right. And so then when it gets lost to time and history. And now you find yourselves as modern pagans grappling at what it really actually meant. Christians fall into the same thing. You had first century Christians that seemed like they really had it together, but then subsequent generations came along and bastardized what it was. And that is what we know today. So we're in this process of taking all of that down and trying to reestablish what it was, what it should be, what it is. And that I would hope that the well-intended people would find themselves in the positions to be leaders by default for having the information that stood the test of time. Be like, in the before time, children, when I
back
was
in my
alive,
day.
yeah, then we can be like, you start a fire, this is how you stop a fire. And that, those kinds of things, those knowledges, unless you've done it or witnessed it, you really can't learn it. I mean, again, we're thinking about an environment, a culture, a world where like maybe the internet goes away.
Yeah.
Or just one EMP from everybody losing their mind because they can't find their way to the end of the block without their GPS. So we need to be the ones, and that's a huge responsibility, but us map readers from the past need to be able to collect the maps, refamiliarize ourselves with how to read a legend, and be prepared to teach these youngins how to get along without their technology, without their crutches, without their government, the way that they've built it. That's my opinion. I would say that we've got to cling it, got to hoard it all right now.
I love everything about what both of you have said, and I think one of the things we've kind of danced around is that people are in a process of needing to rediscover their why. I know Georgia talks about the why a great deal, and that's something that one of my favorite authors, Ayn Rand, talked about. She lived through the Soviet Revolution, and she watched the Red Army and the White Army fight it out, and the army that won was the ones who understood their why. And I want to put that out there for people because our opposition, as hideous as everything that they claim to believe in and do actually is, they know their why. It's a shitty why, but it is just razor sharp focus. There's no doubts in their minds. We need to have that kind of conviction. And with conviction, it doesn't mean that you're indoctrinated. It doesn't mean that you can't entertain competing ideas. It doesn't mean you stop evaluating information. But you've got to get down to the root base and function of all of it. And I think we need to take the lessons that we should be learning from this collapse of civilization into account if we're going to, hopefully at least lay the foundation for something more solid. And that's why I think we should be visionaries. We should absolutely be visionaries. We need to be looking towards the future. And that's why I'm getting to the point of saying, okay, I can let go of what was. Because what was an illusion, and I am ready to let that illusion go, and I want to move forward in reality. I do think that is the path of our generation. Do you think that's a fair assessment, or what do you guys think is really our role right now?
100%. Like you said, everything builds on top of each other. And, you know, as stupid as it sounds, and nobody wants to hear that it's your own job to take care of your own lives and build the future that you want to see. It really is that simple. And we're not going to shut up about it until we start seeing the actual fruits of that labor.
Yeah.
And then
We're
even then we might
Yeah.
not shut up.
We nag. We're middle-aged. We're women. Nagging is what we do. So this will never go away. So you can determine the level of your own suffering and annoyance.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. I would think that, you know, if going back to personal responsibility and things like that, we take so much for granted in our own everyday lives. It feels mundane and monotonous to us. But if without that kind of knowledge preserved, and not just within the family, but just for posterity, we lose it. I mean, if someone dropped me off in the prairie and said, make yourself an earthen house and use this creek to wash your clothes and, you know, build a fire to cook your food, I could probably muddle along. I would figure it out, as Tim Pool likes to say, but it would be a rough couple of days figuring it out.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so it would be much better to go into it saying, okay, I have through experience done this, done that, know how it works and why.
Yeah.
Why it works. What are the alternatives and why do they work or not work? You know, there's just an endless amount of wisdom in understanding yourself and your motivations and what it takes to get by. You can surprise yourself oftentimes if you're given the adversity. If you put yourself in a position where it is do or die, then it's a really good lesson and builds self-esteem for real, you know. And you could, you know, I know that I can survive a blizzard because I lived through one, you know. And instead of, well, you know, I just stay inside my cozy little house with my electric heater on. Well, what happens when the power goes out? It's not coming back. You know, what are you prepared to do? Are you prepared to burn your bamboo?
Yeah.
Are you? Are you willing to let go of some things in order to gain some other function?
I mean, life gets pretty simplified when reality comes up and smacks you across the face. And one of the things that's really gotten us into trouble has been a wholesale rejection of reality or being insulated from reality, like with the electric heater. You know, as a result, a lot of homes do not have the capacity to be able to burn if that's what it took to survive. And you know, what about the delivery of water? There are people who live in deserts that, without all of the wonders of modern plumbing, they would not be able to survive there. We have gone into environments, and you know, because we had this wonderful technology, we've been able to fool ourselves that we had this great mastery and dominion over the natural order, and the natural order does not recognize our authority, and it's always constantly breaking down our technology. So I'd like to put that out as food for thought. Just how far do we understand reality? You know, do we understand what it means to truly be subject to that natural order? Because I got news. We are in the worst possible way.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, as long as South Florida continues to rebuild after hurricanes right on the sand, I have no hope for them. They are reprobate. They will never learn, and they get exactly what they deserve. That is a prime example of humans living and working where they should not, and bucking nature, and it bites them so hard, and then they cry, and then someone fixes it, and then they go right back to the stupid behavior. I have no more sympathy, and I'll use that. It starts with an F, but I have no more sympathy for these types of people that are like, I must live here in this 120-degree weather, or in the, you know, the barrens of tundra, because it's because it's what I want, not because it facilitates a good life for me and my family. It's, why would anyone want to build industry in the middle of these hostile conditions that make you so dependent? There was a simplicity about building next to rivers and water, and lakes, and the town survived by coming together, and there was a sawmill where everybody took their own trees and made their own lumber. There's a beauty there that I think is lost in modern society because of things, we just take for granted places that will provide these things for us, and that we outsource across the world without thinking of how it's affecting us. I forget now who it was I was watching, but they were talking about, Biden's speech again. And I'm harping on Biden today for some reason. He must be thinking about me. But in his speech, he was talking about bringing production back to America, on all the building materials being made in America. And the commentator said, we'd have to cut down every tree on the continental 48 to supply as much wood as we use in the construction of everything. So we really don't want what we're asking for. We're not prepared to do without. We don't want less buildings. We don't want less cosmetically aesthetic buildings, but we want to have it made in America because that, again, makes us feel good for some reason. Not taking the consequences, but the actual physical consequence would be like we have 0 trees, and then we would need immediately more to maintain what we had just built. The nature can't keep up with that. That's not logical, So it's one of those things where when you think about it and how to go forward and what people say versus what would actually happen if they got their wish, it's very scary. We need to be mindful of that and then speak that, repeat those things and say, have you considered that if you, reroute the water coming through the state, that you're, changing the ecosystem in the adjoining state upriver, or the natural flow down to the delta, and you're going to be riddled with bacteria tides for the foreseeable future because you need water.
Well, it goes back into a basic understanding that every action has an equal but opposite reaction. And, you were talking about being productive and overusing our own resources. Wouldn't that, again, be the best experience to realize that, hey, maybe you don't need a new set of furniture every 3 years. Maybe you don't need a new car, every year a new one comes out, and same with your phones and so on and so forth. So, that's it. We're going to be forced into a situation where the odds are going to have to rectify themselves. And it is what it is.
And if we want to take it down to, daily life levels, look at what the attempted reversal of nature has done just in basic human relationships between men and women. Women have been encouraged to be highly masculinized. Men have been encouraged to be very feminized. And even if they're not going to the point of trying to do gender transition, if they're simply trying to act in the opposite of what nature programmed them to do, well, the results have been catastrophic. And then you add on, the nasty chemicals in our water supply, all that birth control that ends up getting recycled, and suddenly, people are being affected of it. People who were never prescribed it, never intended to come in contact with that component, and then you think about what our the way in which our food is produced, how that is affecting our bodies, and suddenly it's like, we are really doing a lot of things that have been breaking us down and that have been trying to force us in the opposite direction of where we're supposed to be. And then on top of all that, as if that's not enough, we have all these ideologies actively, trying to reinforce that process because they know it doesn't actually work. I mean, the whole thing of feminism of trying to essentially put women into the role of men, that is civilization destroying, and that's one reason why people have encouraged it. And there's a reason why the nations that are trying to be on the rise right now are rejecting all of our really horrible ideas, because they're like, that will make us weak. And it has made us weak. Because women, we didn't raise through status by having empowered femininity. We were raised in status because we nagged people into submission, and we started acting like men. And now we can't figure out why people can't have good marriages, and why they can't have just kind of basic common decency amongst men and women in the public sphere as well, because everyone's operating on this really false premise, and they're trying to reinforce the ideology instead of trying to listen to what their own natural inclinations are trying desperately to get through to them. That is foundational in my mind, which is why I've been nagging about it all month. And there's a couple more videos on that topic to come. So I'm making lots of friends this month on the channel. I lost a subscriber on Bitcoin today. It was on my prioritized marriage video. I got a dislike, and then I noticed I had one less subscriber, and I'm like, well, I struck a nerve.
We will win some, we will lose some, but ultimately
we know where their priorities are.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's very revealing, because there are some people who, they're not going to really come out of the fog of their ideologies or whatever is causing them to act, in an anti-nature and anti-human way, which all ties into the political problems we've talked about. It's all joined together. It really is, and having to accept that some people are going to win the Darwin Award. They're not going to make it. And, you can only lead them so far, and then their choices have to be on themselves.
Right. Some people just aren't fit.
Yeah.
I'm okay with it.
I mean, it's sad, but I mean, pretending like that's not the case. I mean, that's the same kind of thinking that got us into this situation. And I really hope that if people take away anything from our conversation, that they take away the idea that every idea, it has an impact and a consequence, and you can't evade those consequences. You can only fool yourself for so long, but it's always going to come back to bite you.
Correct.
Well said.
Well, 2 hours and 20 minutes. We've been at it for a while. Do we have any final thoughts to send the people home with?
Girl, you wrapped it up perfect. I don't even want to touch it. I really don't. That's exactly it, to a T. You know that regardless whether you act or you don't act, it's going to have a reaction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're all ripples in the same pond, and you cannot escape the pond. It will just ripple back on you, whether or not you're, ready for it or not. But yeah, I guess my final thoughts on this would be, as to what do we do going forward? What is our solution? The solution is we have to accept that people of our age bracket are the generation that will need to take the brunt of this. We cannot pass this buck down. We have to reinstill what is truth and take a hard line stance on the Constitution and put down anything that is not constitutional. I think that is the baseline reaction to any news story, anybody asking for your opinion. That should be the first thing out of our mouths is it constitutional? No. Is it gray? Not a topic. Throw it away. And stop pretending like we can fix things by continuing to build the scaffolding. That is not working. That does need to come down completely and go away. Yeah. Burn that, not bamboo.
Yeah. well said. I mean, it's not fun. I mean, we can talk about how unfair it is that this is essentially our lot. I mean, if we can blame the baby boomers all day long, but at the end of the day, nothing's going to get us out of this except for us being the ones like, okay, all the rest of you suck, so I'm going to do the right thing. And I'm going to look
Yeah,
for
I
other people
mean,
doing the right thing. And we'll band together and we'll form our civilization. And when the rest of you are ready to act like grown-ups, maybe we'll let you in if you ask us nicely. Really.
yeah, I mean, we are the Obi-Wans. We're the last hope.
Yeah.
So
So,
this is end of the road
This is it.
kind of
yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, and I don't want anyone hearing this to feel hopeless. If anything, this is a rallying cry. This is our war. This is our battle. And, whatever form that it takes, this is for us to do. So let it energize you. We have a purpose. I mean, we were told our whole lives that we were special. Well, this is how we get to be really special. Let's do something that the baby boomers were too weak to do. Let's do something that the Zoomers and the Alphas don't know to do. Let's be those pioneers for them. And that's what we got, folks. Thank you ever so much for hanging out with us. It was a long one, but we needed to get some stuff off our chest. Needed to say the things that other outlets are just too cowardly to say. Thank you for hanging with us. Please leave us comments. We would very much welcome feedback. We want to know where people are at, and we want to take your ideas into consideration because we don't have all the answers, but maybe by consulting with each other, we can come up with some pretty workable solutions. So that's what we are very humbly asking for. And also, thank you for putting up with any technical difficulties. I don't know why we're getting that weird sound feedback. I'm hoping that's just in my headphones, not for you guys, but if it is, I'm sorry. We're working on it, and thank you for putting up with us. But come see us on Gilded. That's where you can find all three of us. Subscribe to Georgia Liberty's channel on YouTube and all of the other platforms she is on. And I guess we'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.